The stadium lights still blinked like distant echoes on the horizon, while the crowd began to disperse, taking with him the fervor that, minutes earlier, burned the place. Behind the heavy curtains, Michael Jackson walked in silence, feeling the weight of the cold sweat on his skin and a growing void inside his chest. It was another night of success, another unforgettable presentation, but at the same time, it was also another night when he saw himself surrounded only by solitude. In the dressing room, the atmosphere was taken by brilliant costumes, makeshift trophies, and congratulations words that sounded empty. He sat before the mirror, staring at his own reflection with tired eyes, looking for something that seemed to have been lost for a long time. It was then that, searching between forgotten objects, he found an ancient brown cover notebook, spent by time, hidden at the bottom of his suitcase. Not knowing exactly why, he pulled him carefully, as if he had to break some sleeping memory. He flipped his pages blank and felt a strange urgency, a silent need to connect with something that the crowds, platinum discs, and trophies could never fill. He took a pen and, after a long moment of hesitation, began writing. It was not a composition for the next album, not a letter to any businessman or fan. It was for him, for the boy who was once that big-eyed boy who dreamed of being simply an ordinary child. The words came out of the beginning, as if they grip in the dark. "Dear Michael," he wrote, and at that moment, the time barrier seemed to break. Childhood images began to invade your mind. He remembered the first endless rehearsals in the house's small backyard, the severe shouts of his father demanding perfection, the attentive eyes of the brothers who also carried the weight of the dreams of others. While other children ran free through the streets, he decorated steps and melodies, trying not to make mistakes, trying to be good enough to deserve love and acceptance. Each written word was like an ancient wound being reopened, but also as a breath of life in memories that he has always tried to silence. The pen ran through the pages with a mixture of pain and affection, as if he could hug the boy who had been left behind. He wanted to apologize. I wanted to say that he regretted not being able to protect him. He wanted that little Michael to know that, despite everything, there was still a spark of innocence that never went out. The tears began to drain without him noticing, blurring a few words, mixing ink and longing. In the mirror in front of him, he no longer saw the world star, but Indiana's Gary boy, dreaming of carefree afternoons that never arrived. Outside, the team called him. Public life required his presence, but there, at that short moment, Michael Jackson was just Michael, writing a letter to the most forgotten and true of himself. The words continued to run down the roll as if they were confessions that he never dared to do aloud. Each letter seemed to open doors long locked, doors that kept the echoes of the lost childhood. While writing, his mind dived deeper in the past, and the memories began to take shape with a frightening sharpness. Michael found herself small again, in a muffled studio, surrounded by her brothers and watched by her father's demanding look. Joseph Jackson's voice still sounded like thunder in his memory, imposing perfection with each step, with each note, with each gesture. There was no room for mistakes. There was no room to just be a child. The rehearsal hours seemed endless. Tiredness weighed on the small shoulders, but the fear of disappointing was even heavier. While other children in the neighborhood played in the backyards, played ball on dusty streets, Michael and his brothers were attaching to rhythms and choreography that needed to be performed with relentless accuracy. Even at times when I could discreetly laugh with Marlon or Tito, the laughter was silenced by a severe look. The brief escape to play with other boys were rare and always full of guilt. He felt that his freedom was being negotiated in exchange for a successful promise that, although gleaming, seemed increasingly distant than his heart really wanted. The trip started early. Different, but the void remained the same. In each hotel, in each airport, Michael watched local, free, uncompromising children and wondered what it would be like to live without the weight of the show. Common childhood became an unattainable dream. His toys were microphones and bright shoes. Their life lessons came in the form of contracts and commitments. At some point between one trip and another, he understood that childhood, for him, would be something that would exist only in the imagination. With each memory, the pen trembled in his hand. He wrote to that lonely boy who smiled at the cameras while inside. He missed the simplest things: a summer afternoon, a pet dog, a birthday without interviews or audiences. The words became a bridge between the man he was and the boy who still cried silently inside him. Michael wanted that little one to know that he had not forgotten, that every rating he sang, every dance he created was also a desperate attempt to keep the hope that one day pulled in his children's chest. The dressing room around him seemed to disappear. Only he left the letter and the memories that now flowed as rivers of emotions contained for years. When writing "I'm sorry," his hand stopped for a moment, as if those 3 words carry more weight than any crowd could applaud. Michael closed his eyes, allowing himself, although for brief seconds, embracing the pain of the child who has never been allowed to be just a child. The words continued to fill the pages, now more charged with feeling, as if the accumulated pain finally found a way out. Michael allowed his mind to travel even deeper, going to moments that had long tried to forget. He remembered the toys he wanted as a child, the commercials he watched on television with bright eyes, wondering what it would be like to have an electric train, a board game, or a new bike. But almost always, these dreams were lost on the way, swallowed by the obligations and trips that kept him away from home, far from everything that was common to a boy of his age. He recalled the first time that, still very small, he tried to build a sand castle at the back of a hotel during a tour. The sand dripped between its fingers, as well as the time it would never come back. Each grain represented an unpaved joke, a forgotten birthday, a sunny afternoon that never experienced it as it should. The image of that imperfect castle, which the wind soon broke, became a symbol in his mind. Everything he tried to build for himself seemed to be taken away before he was even ready. The passion for fairy tales emerged as a silent response to the hardness of the real world. Stories of enchanted kingdoms, from children who flew to magical lands, places where they never grew, became secret refuges in their tired mind. It was there in fantasy that Michael found shelter. With each page read, with every movie watched, he fed the dream of a place where he could be a child without being tried, without being charged, without being shaped by the expectations of others. Over the years, this need to create a world of its own has become stronger. He began to imagine his own paradise, a place where childhood would be eternal, where laughs echoed freely without fear. It was the embryo of what he would later call Neverland, a physical piece of all that was denied to him. On paper, while writing to the boy he went, Michael tried to explain his choices, his dreams, his excesses. "I wanted that boy to know that every decision made, every extravagance, was a desperate attempt to rebuild what had been lost." Among the lines of the letter, he admitted the sadness he felt at so many times, to have forgotten what it was simply to live. He confessed that he was often stuck between the desire to please the world and the longing to rescue the lost innocence. Its letter became more intense, as if you want to reach little Michael over time, as if you could embrace it, protect it from the demands, the spotlight, from the pain that would come. The letter was already more than a simple writing. It was a reunion. There, in the silence of the dressing room, Michael was not the lone star of millions of fans. Too much, the castle that one day the wind took. As the pen slid on the pages, Michael felt the weight of memories deepening. It was not only the stolen childhood memories that haunted him, but also the first signs that the world was not the fairy tale he wanted so much. He saw himself there, still young, but already aware of the attentive eyes that followed him, the press that was beginning to shape his image, from the industry that treated him not as a boy, but as a product. Fame, which for many seemed like a dream, to him was a golden prison. Each interview, each photo shoot, each public appearance won him more from the child who was still trying to resist within him. He remembered the first major interview where, smiling at the cameras, he felt for the first time his true voice was being silenced. The words were measured, calculated, shaped to fit the public expectation. Amid the flashes and superficial questions, Michael knew that the boy inside him wanted to scream. I wanted to say that he was afraid, that he missed home, that he missed being simply an ordinary boy. But there, before the cameras, there was only room for the impeccable prodigy that everyone expected to see. Each time he left a hotel surrounded by crowds of fans, each time he needed to use disguises to walk the streets, he felt that one more piece was lost. Freedom was something he could only play in dreams. And even in these moments, reality soon woke him up. The smiles he displayed in public were real, but they were also armor. Behind them was a huge loneliness, a feeling of being loved for what I did, but not necessarily by who it was. Gradually, Michael began to understand that fame was not without consequences. With each malicious criticism, with every posted lie, he felt the weight of the exposure to increase. He learned to hide the tears, to harden his heart in the face of betrayals, to build invisible walls between him and the world. Even surrounded by people, he never felt so alone. The boy who was still writing songs in hotel rooms, who still dreamed of free afternoons to run on the grass, was erasing, suffocated by the public figure that the world demanded that it went. He wrote, with his handy hand, for his child, "You are good enough, even when no one said that." It was a truth that took years to understand, and now seemed too urgent to be set aside. The pen seemed heavier, each word carrying the pain of years of emotional silence. Michael knew that letter would not change the past, but it was his way of honoring the survived boy who, despite everything, was still able to dream. The dressing room mirror reflected a tired face, but for the first time in a long time also reflected the sincerity. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, feeling his tears burned his eyelids, but allowed himself to cry. There, away from the stage, far from expectations, he was just himself, reconnecting with the fragile and most true part of his history. The letter followed like a river flowing into ever deeper memories. Michael now wrote about the moments when he tried to rescue the lost innocence in silent ways, away from the eyes that judged everything. He remembered the nights when, in unknown hotel rooms, he created small worlds for himself. He played with plush dolls, watched old designs, and pretended for a few hours that time had returned. It was a desperate attempt to revive what had been ripped without mercy. On paper, he told his child, who never failed to look for this refuge, even when the world pointed to him as eccentric, as strange. He remembered the times when he created whole scenarios in his mind, where trees spoke, animals danced, and laughter was a song that never ended. It was not immaturity, no escape, as so many suggest. It was survival. It was the way he found to keep the purest part of himself alive, in the face of a universe that only offered him charges and judgments. The letter now became a request for understanding. Michael wanted this boy to know that all the costumes, all the parks, all the extravagant gestures were sincere attempts to reconnect with the genuine joy, with the simplicity that was always denied to him. How you feel more comfortable in the company of children, because they could still see the world with pure eyes. Beside them, he could forget for a moment the pressure of being an icon, could laugh without fear, play without guilt, exist without masks. The children did not judge him on the discs sold or broken records. For them, Michael was not the unreachable star. It was just a friend who liked to play hide and seek and tell stories. As the pen continued his course, he wrote about Neverland, not as a symbol of eccentricity, but as the realization of an old dream. A piece of land where childhood was eternal, where the pain was outside the gates. Each carousel, every giant wheel, every laugh that echoed through that place was an attempt to cure a wound that never completely healed. Michael wanted the boy to know that, despite all the scars, he never gave up protecting the child who carried within him. Time seemed suspended in that dressing room. The letter grew, extending on pages and more pages, as if the whole life was finally told, not to the world, but to himself. Each written word was a small victory against oblivion, against sadness, against loneliness. Deep down, Michael understood that he might never completely restore what he lost, but he knew that attempt was already a love gesture. The letter was a hug written, a silent promise that the boy inside him would never be abandoned again. The letter was almost over. The words flowed with a silent intensity, as if Michael were revealing the last part of a secret kept throughout a lifetime. He had revisited his childhood, insecurities, and his greatest dreams, but there was also a sense of growing peace, as feelings finally broke free on paper. Now, what was left was a deep breath, a last attempt to understand why he had been lost so much in the pursuit of perfection. He remembered the lonely nights when, after the shows, he locked himself in his room, nothing but a black screen and his own reflection. When the last curtain closed, applauded by thousands of people, he saw himself alone, more lost than ever. No prize, no recognition, no applause could fill the void he felt. Fame, with all its brightness, seemed unreal in the face of the reality he tried to cover up: a stolen childhood, a youth required, and a man trying to be everything except himself. While writing, Michael realized how he, for so many years, had tried to be everything the world wanted him to go. I wanted to be a renowned artist, but I also wanted to be someone with whom people really cared, not for fame, but for their true essence. I wanted to be more than an icon, more than an untouchable figure. I wanted to be finally loved by who he was, not just for his music or his image. The letter then became a request for forgiveness, not only to himself, but also for all those around him. He knew he had failed many relationships, perhaps because of the desperate need to please, to be accepted, to become greater than his own humanity allowed. But what he feared most, what he hurt most, was not being able to show the unconditional love he felt for others. He always wondered if, somehow, he could have been different. And even with all his achievements, silence in the bottom of his heart still shouted for answers. The pen trembled when he wrote, with a resigned sigh, "I love you." It wasn't just a "I love you" to your childish self, but an acceptance statement. An acceptance that it took so long to understand, so much to give yourself. Now, with the end of that letter, he felt that he had fulfilled something that seemed impossible: to reconcile with the child who could never be, and at the same time, with the man who had become. Finally, he put the pen aside. The paper was full, but the feeling that filled his chest was different. It was no longer the emptiness. It was a deep stillness, a closure for a part of its history that, until that moment, he will not be able to tell. The letter was complete. Michael finally found peace amid the whirlwind that has always been his life. This time, it was not just an icon. It was a human being, imperfect but whole, with the memory of a child who, despite everything, still knew how to dream.